Hello, dear friends. Today we continue our acquaintance with the memoirs of Waffen SS Major General Kurt Meyer. Don't forget to rate the video and leave your opinion about this material. Well, let's begin. It was gradually becoming unbearably cold. Since we had neither greatcoats nor blankets, we suffered greatly, shivering from the cold. Sleep was out of the question. If only we could have smoked. The radio communication vehicle slowly crawled upward. Under its cover, I smoked and studied the map again. The longer I looked at it, the more I shivered. At first, I thought my teeth were chattering because of the terrible cold, but then I realized that I was very scared. The more time passed, the more tense I became. I could no longer stay in the car. The radio transmitter with its endless beep, beep, beep was getting on my nerves. Outside, I tried not to talk to anyone. I was afraid that someone would hear my teeth chattering and realize that I was scared. We all huddled silently behind a rock, peering into the darkness. Were my comrades afraid too? I didn't know. Motorized rifleman Jan from the 1st Company of the SS Reconnaissance Unit arrived with a report. However, he did not look scared. He reported the situation to me briefly and clearly, and then they gave him a sip of alcohol from the medic's flask. It was getting lighter. Soon we could make out the outlines of the village. The attack by our 3 combat groups was to begin with fire from 88mm guns. I leaned behind the gun shield and tried to see something in the darkness through my binoculars. The closer the time to open fire came, the stronger my confidence in the success of the attack grew. It simply had to be successful. I counted on the enemy having learned the basics of military science at the military academy, and anticipated what measures we might take in this case. From everything the Greek commander had been taught, he would expect me to advance my motorized unit along the road. That is why I am attacking him across 2 ridges, and will only launch a diversionary attack on the road. As the shadows of the night faded, the outlines of houses became visible. Crouching low to the ground, I gave Naumann the order to open fire. In a matter of seconds, we found ourselves in a witch's cauldron. An 88mm anti-aircraft gun fired shell after shell at the ridge to our right. Mortars and infantry guns also showered the defenders with mines and heavy shells. High above us, motorcyclists stormed the enemy's defensive positions. I couldn't see how the 2 motorcycle companies were attacking, but I could hear the furious machine gun fire and the explosions of their grenades. The commander of the heavy howitzer battery informed me that he could no longer provide fire support to the attacking companies without endangering his crew. The guns took up positions along the mountain road, one after another, but because the road was too narrow, they could not anchor their plows in the ground. The commander refused to take responsibility. This kind of stupidity was the last straw for me. In anger, I ordered him to open fire. We had to do it. Heavy shells thundered over the first ridge and exploded on enemy positions on either side of the small mountain village. Enemy machine gun fire rained down on the road and the rocks above us, causing a rock slide. Stones whizzed past us with a roar. There was nothing left to do but move forward. We rushed forward, jumping like frogs, to the first bend in the road and took cover a few meters ahead, behind a rock. At the next bend, we would be directly below the enemy position, 100 meters above us. After such a sprint, I collapsed, exhausted, behind a boulder and gasped for air. Our advance was hampered by the fact that we had to run from one pile of rocks to another, using them as cover so as not to become targets for enemy snipers. We heard screams and the furious sounds of battle above us. Units of the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion broke through to the enemy's positions on the first ridge. We rushed forward. At the last big turn of the winding road, we came across several soldiers who had been separated from the rest of the company during the attack. Among them was SS Untersturmführer Vorvinek, who briefly reported to me on the operation on the ridge. From information obtained from prisoners, we learned that we were facing a reinforced infantry regiment on the left flank of the Greek defense. Its task was to hold the Castoria pass, ensuring the retreat of the 3rd Greek Corps from the Albanian front, which was being withdrawn to avoid encirclement by German motorized units and to continue the battle for Greece in cooperation with British forces. The Greek plan could not be allowed to succeed. The retreat not only had to be prevented, but also had to be completely defeated. We had to complete our crossing of the mountains and block the valley beyond Castoria. We continued to advance along the road. Suddenly, the ground in front of us shot up. I couldn't believe my eyes. A huge crater had formed in the very place where the road had been just a moment before. The road had fallen into an abyss. Sweat left light streaks on our faces. We were terrified. After all, in the next few seconds we could also be blown up. Another 100 meters further, the ground shook again, and when the dust settled, there was another giant crater on the road. We hid behind the rocks, not daring to move. I felt nauseous. I shouted to Emil Varbjanek that we had to attack, but good old Emil looked at me as if he doubted my sanity. Machine gun fire tore through the rocks in front of us. Our leading unit consisted of only 10 soldiers. Damn it. Of course we couldn't stay there while craters were forming on the road from the explosions, and machine gun fire was pinning us to the rocks. However, like everyone else, I hid in cover and feared for my life. How could I order Varbjanek to go first? As I continued to worry, I felt the smooth roundness of an egg-shaped grenade in my hand. I called out to the group. Everyone looked at me in amazement as I showed them the grenade, pulled the pin, and it rolled to the last Grenadier. I had never seen such a united rush forward. As if bitten by a tarantula, we rushed across the rocks and jumped into the crater that had just formed. The state of stupor was broken. The grenade had done its job. We smiled together and rushed forward to a new shelter. At the top of the ridge, our attacking companies penetrated deeper and deeper into the Greek defenses. Our 88mm guns were in clouds of dust and smoke from the explosions of Greek mountain artillery shells, but Naumann's anti-aircraft guns continued to fire. The shells from the anti-aircraft guns cleared the way for us, burying the pockets of Greek resistance under piles of rubble. We were right below the ridge. Sweat blurred my vision. I watched the battle through a veil of dust and dirt. We rushed like madmen toward the ridge. The Greeks were leaving their positions, raising their hands and ceasing resistance. Their retreat was already covered by fire from the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion, whose machine guns were firing directly at the enemy positions from their dominant height. My soldiers broke the resistance of the Greeks, supported by a battery of mountain guns, with the help of hand grenades. We made the crossing through the mountains at the limit of our strength. My Grenadiers accomplished what others considered impossible, and what even today is considered madness. The Castoria Pass is ours. But there was no time to rest. Only a swift pursuit of the enemy would bring us complete victory. Our sappers used explosives to bring down rock debris into craters on the road. The artillery changed position and fired at the retreating enemy. Entire columns were moving west and then south. The resistance of the Greeks, who as a rule bravely held their positions until their last breath, was broken. We took more than 1,000 prisoners, including a regimental commander and 3 battalion commanders. Only then did the strategic importance of the position we had captured become clear to us. From the pass, we could see the Greek troops retreating from Albania, and we directed all our weapons at them. I wanted to move further ahead of the fleeing enemy, but again, on the road that descended steeply, explosions thundered, deafening us. Precious time was lost filling in the giant craters left by the high explosive shells. The 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion drove down the road and entered a small village. All of its inhabitants had left their homes and fled. I wanted to regroup my battalion there and then move along the main Greek retreat route. I waited for the first company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion. Soon, young soldiers appeared. I understood everything from their faces. They were carrying the remains of their company commander on a blood-soaked raincoat. Rudolf Schroeder lay in front of me, his chest torn to pieces. He had achieved outstanding military successes, but was killed while breaking through the enemy's defense system, commanding the lead assault group. We descended from the mountains towards evening and reconnoitered the approaches to Castoria, a town on the shore of the lake of the same name, 630 meters above sea level. I wanted to conduct reconnaissance and followed the reconnaissance group. We slowed down in front of a small bridge. Beyond it we could see a hill 800 meters high, dominating the approaches to Castoria, as well as the retreat routes of the 3rd Greek Corps. There was no movement visible on the bridge. It had not yet been blown up. Suddenly, machine gun fire was opened on us. War correspondent Franz Roth, who was walking with the reconnaissance group, suddenly cried out in pain. A bullet had literally split his skull open. With his head covered in blood but still alive, the correspondent was sent back to his colleagues. The 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion reached the bridge at nightfall, creating a small bridgehead. The company conducted reconnaissance north of Lake Castoria and encountered stubborn enemy resistance. The attack on the 800-meter height southwest of Castoria began at dawn. Again, our shells roared overhead and smashed boulders, but the Greek artillery was more powerful here. The bridge collapsed from a direct hit. We lay at the bottom of the trench, pressed into the muddy ground. The intensity of the artillery fire told me that a sudden assault would not be successful. A well-planned attack was needed. Around midday, the attack was resumed with the support of heavier artillery and the 3rd Battalion of the SS Motorized Infantry Brigade, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. The battalion advanced to encircle the Greek positions on the left and was supposed to reach the main Greek retreat route by evening. To suppress the strong Greek artillery and help destroy the enemy's positions at an altitude of 800 meters, U-87 dive bombers were called in to support my battalion. The operation was carried out with unmatched precision. The U-87s struck the enemy positions like birds of prey, circling widely around the mountain and then diving deep down with a roar. Flashes from the bombs dropped, lit up the heights and the mountain range, and the sound of explosions could be heard. Mushroom-shaped columns of dust and stones rose into the sky, merging with each other and drifting like a dark haze over the lake. A thick veil covered the mountain, revealing the devastating effect of our bombs and artillery shells. It was a scene of utter devastation. When the first bombs fell, the motorcyclists jumped out of their trenches and ran across the open field, gasping for breath. Excellent anti-aircraft gunfire completed the work of the U-87 and heavy artillery. It would be a long time before the Greeks recovered from the U-87 attack. By then, it would be too late. Soldiers from the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion climbed the mountain and took up positions among the rocks. The rest of the battalion rushed to Castoria across a hastily repaired bridge. The unsuspecting Greek companies and batteries retreating from the mountains were so stunned that they did not fire a single shot and voluntarily surrendered. However, one of the Greek batteries continued to fire and was smashed to pieces by us. Our battalion's armored vehicles roared past the Greek columns toward the center of Castoria. The chaos was complete. In the market square, I was greeted by the local priest. I will never forget his brotherly embrace. After that, I stank of garlic for several hours. At dusk, my brave comrades took over the defense of the northern approaches to Castoria. Greek troops marched on and on from Albania to Castoria after fighting with Italian forces. The Greeks had given the Italians a good thrashing, but now they were forced to retreat under the threat of encirclement by the Germans. It rained constantly. The rumblings of a powerful thunderstorm alternated with the roar of shells and bombs. Our forces were running out. We fell asleep right where we were. The extent of our success became apparent only the next morning. Over the past 24 hours, my reconnaissance battalion had taken 12,000 prisoners and captured 36 guns. For the performance of my brave Grenadiers, I was awarded the Knight's Cross. The fighting with the trapped Greek army continued. The SS Leibstandarte Brigade, overcoming considerable difficulties, took the Castoria Pass through the Pindus Mountains and forced the 16th Greek Division to surrender. The surrender was signed on April 21st in Larissa. Towards the evening of April 24th, when I was in Ioannina, west of the Castoria Pass, I was ordered to pursue the defeated British troops. My comrades in arms had just managed to get a good night's sleep for the first time since the start of the Balkan campaign. In the morning, they were roused from their dreamless sleep. The fuel tanks of our motorcycles and cars were filled to the brim from canisters taken from the Greek garage. No one bothered to collect the Greek machine guns stored at the Ali Pasha Mosque in the old Turkish fortress, as well as the countless weapons left in the city. The Greek soldiers who had retreated here across the mountain passes from Albania left their weapons leaning against the walls of houses, shaved off their dark beards, and went to the nearest bakery. They left with loaves of fresh bread, a bunch of leeks, and, if they were lucky, a few fish strung on a rod. Then they wandered south again. We intercepted them. This interception once again clearly demonstrated to us the difference between the path of the victors and the path of the vanquished. These people, who had previously been fishermen, farmers, shepherds, merchants, or professional soldiers, were apparently quite respectable before the defeat of Greece. Now they wandered chaotically through valleys and mountain passes, returning home in disgrace. The war had ended for them in hopeless confusion, even if we happened to see a lone colonel sitting upright in his saddle. It was decay. We, however, advanced further and further. We were going to corner the British sooner or later. The battalion did not stop anywhere, but along the way we asked a few questions in every village or small town. Those who managed to cut themselves a piece of bread with fat spread on it along the way until they ate it, covered it with their hands so as not to eat the quickly accumulating layer of dust and dirt along with it. Only once, at the bay, did I allow myself a short stop. I found the local orange groves simply enchanting. The soldiers filled their helmets with fragrant fruit. We wanted to taste them and make sure we were in the south. On a narrow mountain road stood an unfortunate pony of the Greek army, a white horse with blue shadows showing between its ribs. Abandoned, without harness, on its last breath. It did not move. It stood like a monument to defeat. Our armored cars and motorcycles passed by it. The horse was also a veteran of a lost war, an exhausted, pitiful creature. Further south, we crossed turbulent mountain rivers and saw unarmed soldiers enjoying the cool water. But we, covered in mud and sweat, could not enjoy a single drop. We saw thousands of people lying in the shade of olive trees. Instead, we had to keep an eye on the fuel gauge and the bends in the road. We had to avoid potholes and hold on tight to the steering wheel when our vehicles were thrown about on the bumps. Of course, we remembered the miserable Polish roads, but this road was a bloody cheese grater that seemed to want to shake our souls out of us. Evening gave way to night, and we still hadn't reached our destination. British soldiers and demolition teams, who had broken away from their units, scattered before us. Greek peasants told us that the British were laying spike strips on the roads to delay our advance, and this turned out to be true. The drivers cursed as they had to change yet another flat tire. We made a short stop in a small town. The battalion couldn't afford to attract attention. The pursuit of the British continued at dawn. We raced southward, up through a low mountain range, and down again into the valley. We crossed deep gorges. The ruins of classical Greece welcomed us. Someone remembered Lord Byron, who was killed here in battle with the Turks in 1824. But we had no time to think about history. The city of Messalongi appeared right in front of us. Soon, we would reach the Isthmus of Corinth, and then we would be able to intercept the British. The vanguard cautiously moved along its route towards the city and entered its narrow streets. The Greek population welcomed us. The last British troops had just left the city and were retreating along the coast, on the road leading east towards the Isthmus of Corinth. A dash across the Peloponnese. We endured a 250-kilometer march through mountainous country and stopped in front of the dark mountains towering over the Peloponnese Peninsula. We had no radio contact with the regiment. We were alone. British reconnaissance planes flew overhead and circled over the port of Patras on the other side of the bay. We could see the ships in the harbor, and we saw a British destroyer setting sail to head south. We were following in the footsteps of the British demolition teams and would soon reach the Isthmus of Corinth. But I was no longer interested in this kind of pursuit. The gaping craters in the road slowed us down. I thought I would gain more experience in road construction than I would in intercepting the British. The mountains on the other side of the Gulf of Corinth increasingly attracted my attention. Along the road, along the coast of the Peloponnese, at the far end of the Gulf, British troops were moving from Corinth to Patras to reach their ships and evacuate. I had to get there. But how could I cross the Gulf? I was standing on the pier at Naupaktos, a small, unremarkable harbor with medieval fortress towers, when a formation of U-87 dive bombers attacked the port of Patras. Clouds of smoke and explosions rose into the air from the cluster of ships. Suddenly I noticed the telephone. It was still connected, it was working, and Patras was answering. Shuddering, I put the receiver back on the arm of the ancient device. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all soon.